And welcome back, folks, to Truth versus News for October 28th, the scary times before Halloween here. And of course, we're debating official facts and acts that seem to be holding sway with the media. And who can trust the media these days? Well, our most dangerous mind in America, Jim Fetcher, has got the comments on this and has got some news stories that really reveal that we're the truth. We've never been called fake news, but and the news is bad, and so go for it, Jim. What we got next?
Thank you. Thank
you.
Thank
California.
you. Thanks, Don.
Yeah. Let's see.
Operation Torch California, hard evidence proving wildfires started by arsonists. State of the Union has a brilliant article here. Geoengineered California firestorms, deliberate acts of pyroterrorism. As expected and predicted, the California fall wildfire season was exploded with geoengineering precision and pinpoint arson attacks. For those uninitiated in the convoluted workings of the complex criminal conspiracy behind these intentional acts of pyroterrorism, the following expose provides a necessary background and history. Every resident of California ought to be deeply familiar with the well-established dynamic expressed by the preceding post title. Likewise, every person traveling through the now charted Golden State should know exactly where they are going to and staying vis-a-vis the targeted areas that are being burned down on purpose by the state-sponsored criminal conspiracy. Your life may depend upon it. Yes, the once great state of California has always experienced its share of destructive wildfires in the form of forest fires, brush fires, and grass fires. However, the last decade has seen a dramatic uptick in both the number and intensity of these devastating conflagrations. It's of paramount importance to comprehend that this new trend has been fabricated with highly purposeful design, and that the real perps, state-sponsored geoengineers and foreign-controlled globalists, are responsible for both covertly creating the conducive conditions for these wildfires, as well as stealthily starting and spreading them via various arson techniques and technologies. Let's face it, when headlines like this now appear regularly during California's 2 wildfire seasons each and every year now, something is very seriously wrong indeed in the Golden State. What follows is a video of just one wildfire site in Northern California that was just arson attacked by a fire-triggered DEW, directed energy weapon device. Below the video is a screenshot that shows the size of that conflagration relative to the California coastline. For a better frame of reference, the following map of Northern California indicates the area of this particular conflagration in Mendocino County. That's wine country, which is west of Sacramento and east of the coastline where it juts out into the Pacific. So here you have the coast. There you see Sacramento, and you see the Mendocino National Forest, and you can see the area of the fire just north of Santa Rosa, just north and west. So this is the general vicinity they're addressing here for this particular conflagration. Here's a close-up of the same explosive fire at the very beginning of the burning phase. Notice how explosive it appears. For the proper context of this screenshot frame, watch the entire video before it's taken down by YouTube. Kincaid, California offers a kind of low-density population, locale, and type of terrain for wildland fires that the New World Order globalists are dead set on burning out and burning down respectively. Here's why. Deracination. In this deliberate way, the real perps are terrorizing the residents with annual firestorms in order to forcefully move them off their ancestral lands, especially throughout the conservative red counties of California. However, there are also many blue county residents getting burned out as well over the last few years. This ongoing series of clandestine black operations is all about purposeful and well-planned deracination. Definition: to uproot, to remove or separate from a native environment or culture, especially to remove the racial or ethnic characteristics or influences from. Not only are the governmental and corporate co-conspirators committing a targeted genocide with these false flag attacks, false flag because they are incorrectly blamed on Mother Nature and PG&E, they are then stealing the coveted lands wherever, whenever, and however they can. The New World Order globalists well know that nothing works so effectively as to scare the residents off their property via a surreptitious implementation plan of deracination. Here's an intel analyst and former U.S. military officer. California is using the fire get on meme to fearmonger and terrorize Red County residents off their land. First, they predict the fires, then turn off the power, then start the fires. Next, they spread the fires. Yes, there's much more to this power shutdown, but that's the gist of it. Why else are they burning out so many folks up and down the state? Scott?
Oh, terrible.
Well, this is significant because it's just down the street from me. I live in California in the Bay Area, and Lafayette has been totally evacuated. Lafayette is a very wealthy area, a very old wealth area, probably a lot of Republicans, just before the Caldecott Tunnel, just before you go into Berkeley. So Lafayette yesterday was completely evacuated. And I, of course, am shaking my head with disgust that this is going on. The fires, the smoke is everywhere. You can smell it. It's saturating the atmosphere. The winds are incredible, Jim. The winds here are blowing all the massive leaves off and trunks and limbs off the trees. There's a great oak in Danville that has broken in half. The winds are incredible. And, you know, this is a psyop. This is an act of terrorism and something that Trump certainly needs to, in fulfillment of his oath, defend against. I wouldn't be surprised if it's the Chinese who have a role in this. And I know, of course, the New World Order and these globalist types and stuff. But we have to stand our ground and occupy and really take, and Don knows this and can comment on it, giving notice to the police and the powers that be that you are committing an act of terrorism, and we are not moving or abandoning our homes, and we will not be chattel and pushed in for social engineering purposes. This is not a land that we can be deracinated from. This is a land that we have to stand our ground and fight to the death to defend. Jim?
Well, it's just stunning, Scott. I mean, I was born in Pasadena. I grew up in Southern California, and to see this happening to a once great state, perhaps by far the most impressive state of the union, is just a tragedy for everyone involved. And it doesn't appear to me that the high officials of the state are doing anything to deal with the issue, which implies to me that they have to be complicit themselves.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, even when Trump went there after the other fire, it seemed like there was nothing much done. It was just, and when you see cars and homes burned down totally to ash, and there's trees that are still green, that's just not a natural fire, folks. And the fault is with the power company, and that's controlled. And believe me, it's not controlled for the best interest of the people living there. It's so outrageously sad.
See, they're also going to, after they do these attacks, they will then do the psychological softening up, kumbaya, we're all in it together, light a candle, give a hug, let's just, you know, play a concert for music for the people who were injured by the fires. Oh, and by the way, get off this land and we don't care where you go. So the next stage is going to be this massive saturation of, you know, prayer and tear vigils and giving of clothes and cans and all of this this just emotionalism.
They're following a script.
Yes,
absolutely. Yeah, you bet. Yeah, see this?
We can resume.
Yeah, there we go.
You ready to pay $30,000 for sharing a photo online? The House of Representatives thinks you are. Tomorrow, the House, this would have been a couple of days ago, scheduled a vote on what appears to be an unconstitutional copyright bill that carries with it life-altering penalties. The bill would slap $30,000 fines on internet users who shared a copyrighted work they don't own online. The Case Act creates a new tribunal separate from the federal judiciary, part of the constitutional problem, and places it within the Copyright Office. This agency has a sad history of industry capture and often takes its clues from major content companies as opposed to average Americans. The new tribunals will receive complaints from rights holders, anyone who's taken a photo, video, or written something, and will issue a notice to the party being sued. We don't actually know what the notice will look like. It could be an email, a text message, a phone call with a voicemail, a letter in the mail. Once a notice goes out, the targeted user has to respond within a tight deadline. Failure to respond in time means you'll automatically lose or are on the hook for 30 grand. That's why EFF is concerned that this law will be easily abused by copyright trolls. The trolls will cast a wide net in the hope of catching internet users unaware. Corporations with lawyers will be able to avoid all this because they'll have paid employees in charge of opting out of the Case Act. But regular Americans with kids, jobs, and other real-life obligations could easily miss those notices and lose out. Meanwhile, AOC is going after Mark Zuckerberg for not being sufficiently censorious in relation to political advertising. In other words, this comes from a left-wing side, and they're portraying AOC as a champion of truth, when in fact she's actually unwilling to allow both sides to be aired. She's attacking Mark Zuckerberg unjustly. According to this left-wing site, Facebook isn't only tolerating disinformation and political advertisements, it's facilitating it. Anything, for example, that suggests that Trump is doing a good job as president or that the Democrats are miserably failing is going to be disinformation in their mind. Mark Zuckerberg is an awkward guy. This is true when he's giving tours of his house. It's true when he's live streaming himself smoking meats. It's especially true when Congress is grilling him about how the social media network he created to keep tabs on the relationship status of his crush is facilitating the downfall of Western civilization. Such was the case Wednesday when the Facebook CEO is confronted by AOC, who's already proven herself to be, remember, this is from a left-wing site, one of the sharpest, most effective inquisitors in the House. And the exchange revealed a core truth about Zuckerberg as he struggles to reckon with how Facebook had been used to subvert democracy. According to them, he has no idea what he's doing. I say actually it reveals something like the opposite. Take, for example, how he responded when AOC tried to determine to what extent Facebook is going to fast check. And remember, their fast checkers don't have scholarly degrees. They aren't academicians. They are not scholars. They haven't done any research. They're political hacks. We're creating yet another layer of censorship to support the propaganda being peddled by the left. A pretty vital issue, political advertising for the company to get a handle on with 2020 looming. Here's the exchange at Friday's hearing at the House Financial Services Committee, AOC. Could I run ads on Facebook targeting Republicans in primaries saying they voted for the Green New Deal? If you're not fact-checking political advertisements, I'm just trying to understand the bounds of what is fair game, since obviously she assumes no Republican is going to be supporting the Green New Deal. Zuckerberg, I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head, AOC. So you don't know if I'll be able to do that, Zuckerberg? I think probably. AOC, you see a potential problem here with a complete lack of fact-checking on political ads? Zuckerberg, I think lying is bad. I think if you were to run an ad that had a lie, that would be bad. That's different from it being, in our position, the right thing to do to prevent your contestants or people in an election from seeing that you had lied. In other words, he's saying let 1,000 flowers bloom, let all sides prevail, and let the American people make up their mind. AOC isn't satisfied. So you won't take down lies, or you will take down lies. It's a pretty simple yes or no. Zuckerberg, in most cases in a democracy, I believe people should be able to see for themselves what politicians they may or may not vote for are saying and judge their character for themselves. AOC. so you won't take them down. You may flag it's wrong, but you won't take it down. Zuckerberg, it depends on the context that it shows up, organic posts, ads, what have you. Zuckerberg, in my opinion, is completely in the right and AOC in the wrong, but of course she's going to be idolized by the left. Not very reassuring. In fact, it's terrifying and all but guarantees the platform will be co-opted by bad actors looking to spread disinformation for next year's election. But what they fail to add is they're mostly on the left. They're left-wing zealots who are willing to lie no matter what to take down the man they perceive as the personification of evil, Donald Trump. Earlier this month, Judd Legum's Popular Information reported a change in Facebook's policy on misinformation, making it easier for political campaigns to lie in ads they run on the platform. Legum highlighted a recent ad purchased by the Trump campaign that included claims about Joe Biden and Ukraine that were ruled false by Facebook, but I guarantee you they were true. Approved third-party fact checkers, which just expose them to be the shills they are. Under the new policy, the ad was allowed to stand as it should have been. And I guarantee you, based on my own research, it was an accurate ad. Meanwhile, Americans overwhelmingly reject anti-BDS laws, a poll finds. Almost 80% of Democrats who know about the movement to boycott Israel say it's legitimate, according to the new poll. Americans overwhelmingly reject laws designed to penalize supporters of BDS, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement for Palestinian rights, according to the poll. More than 70% of respondents oppose laws that target BDS activists as an infringement on the constitutional right to free speech. That opposition rises to 80% among Democrats, but is still remarkably high among Republicans at 62%. With the encouragement of Israel and its lobbying groups, of course, AIPAC in particular, 27 U.S. states have adopted anti-BDS laws, which is completely absurd. Similar measures pending in Congress face strong opposition from civil liberties groups. The University of Maryland Critical Issues poll asked a representative sample of more than 3,000 in September about their attitude toward Middle East issues. Among respondents, about half had heard something about BDS. Of those, 26% support BDS. Another 26% neither supports nor oppose it. Meanwhile, 47%, fewer than half, oppose BDS, but still by far the plurality. Following recent trends, there's a strong party polarization. Only 8% of Republicans support BDS, compared to 48% of Democrats. In this case, of course, the Democrats are in the right. Just 15% of Democrats oppose BDS, confirming that the boycott is reaching the party's progressive base. 77% of the Democrats who have heard of the movement agree that BDS is a legitimate, peaceful way of opposing Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories, with which I agree 100%. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, you know, I had to laugh about Zuckerberg's comments because he, in his stupidity, he says your political contestants instead of your political constituents. So these Harvard-educated simpletons need to be, quote, bitch slapped. And I can't imagine anybody better than me and better to do it to Zuckerberg. But, you know, it is, the only thing more disturbing is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's, you know, very attractive in many ways, but then she's just a fascist, a blood-dripping fascist and racist who thinks if you're white, you're conservative, you're a Republican, you are the enemy of all humanity, you're the destroyer of society and the environment, and you're the reason that she won't have children. And she's said that. So you feel sorry for these poor girls that are growing up and listening to bad men and following this Pied Piper philosophy of self-destruction and suicide and an exorcist surgical deneuterization of their ability to have children, if you get the symbolism. But I think, of course, Facebook and YouTube and all of these platforms really are losing their ability to connect with people. They had it in the beginning, People followed it because it was free. People really believe there was an exchange of ideas, but then it's starting to be controlled. And we saw that, for example, Jim, again in the New Zealand shooting, when we revealed the New Zealand shooting event where the shooter went into the mosque and allegedly shot people up. We revealed that as totally false. We showed very plainly that no bullets impacted any bodies, no bullets impacted any walls. There was no traditional or typical physical reactions from bodies that are impacted with bullets of high caliber weapons. And we know that from military experience. But yet, and that's another thing Jason Goodman tried to explain away in his Mossad operative training. But we saw our YouTube pages taken down when we portrayed that. So Facebook and YouTube are aiding and abetting, and Google aiding and abetting these crimes of psychological trauma, crimes of trying to brainwash the American people, trying to violate their civil and constitutional rights. That's what the media, the new media, the social media are increasingly becoming symbolized as. And I think that there are alternatives that are going to rise up that are going to have absolute freedom. And yes, you'll get a lot of trolls and propaganda, but people are very quickly becoming aware of the toxicity of social media. And never mind, all the bad stuff that it has on children. There are kids now that are sadly addicted to a lot of these social media exchanges, and because their parents are too inattentive or too stupid or too brainwashed to interfere and defend them against it. And of course, we see another side of that with this whole transgender movement, where you have cases like a little 7-year-old boy, his lunatic mother is trying to chemically castrate him, and the courts are allowing her to do that. I'm sorry, that's like saying you have a right to kill this little boy, because that's essentially what you're doing. And that's what social media and all of these things are trying to normalize. But I think, again, it's going to cause a revolution and a civil war. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a good thing to really chop off the gangrene limbs and start this country afresh. Jim?
It's bizarre, Scott. Cases like that are just dumbfounding. Dumbfounding.
Okay.
Meanwhile, YouTube removed 17,000 channels, 100,000 videos, 500 million comments for hate speech. This really is speech that contradicts the official narrative, which they hate. YouTube says it has removed more than 17,000 videos. The Google-owned company calls it June update, in which YouTube said it would specifically prohibit videos that glorify Nazi ideology or deny documented violent events like the so-called Holocaust, which was a propaganda exercise. Those were labor camps. So it wasn't a documented, hundreds of babies were born in those camps. This is just embarrassingly bad, the ignorance and stupidity, really the political manipulation. And Lenny Posner's promoted them to not deny real world events, meaning begging the question about which events were real and which were not. It's outrageous. A fundamental shift in our policies resulting in the takedown of more than 100,000 individual videos during the second quarter of the year. The number of comments removed during the same period doubled to over 500 million, in part due to the new hate speech policy. So apparently only some Americans have the freedom to express their opinions and others not. YouTube said that 30,000 videos it had removed in the last month represent 3% of the views that knitting videos generated during the same period. We've been removing harmful content since YouTube started, but our investment in this work has accelerated in recent years as though they were in the position to judge what's harmful and what is not. It's just embarrassingly bad when they talk about detailing their efforts to clean up their platform through the removal of videos that violate their standards when their standards are completely inappropriate and wrong. YouTube, which has 2 billion monthly logged in users, has come under fire in recent years for its struggle to keep up with a constant influx of new content that promotes violence, hate speech, or misinformation. Really, it's combating the fake news, which they are supporting. The company has taken steps to censor its platform and remove such content, relying on its machine learning technology, AI, to help detect videos that are in need of human review. In the blog post, YouTube said an update to its spam detection system during the second quarter led to a 50% increase in the number of channels that were terminated for violating spam policies, which are no doubt not well-founded and inimical to freedom of speech and freedom of the press. Together with Google, YouTube has a team of over 10,000 who focus on detecting, reviewing, and removing videos that violate its misconceived policy. YouTube says the videos removed represent a 5-time increase compared with the previous 3 months. Still, in early August, the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, which is the intellectual arm of the Mossad Center on Extremism, reported finding a significant number of channels that continue to spread anti-Semitic and white supremacist content. That would be any content that's critical of Israel, supportive of the BDS movement, or that wants to put America first. God, it's a disgrace. Meanwhile, hallelujah, Alt Censored is capturing, saving censored YouTube videos channel. If you want a vision of the future, imagine a boot stomping your face forever. The Heck Orwellian platform. YouTube took down more than 100,000 individual videos during the second quarter. It's been running 30,000 a month since. The number of comments removed is over 500 million because of its dubious new hate speech policy. YouTube channels serving conspiracy inquiry or unapproved political messages are labeled hate speech and shut down by the thousands. Yet the promotion of murder, drugs, criminal activity, and gang life to young people is perfectly acceptable to the hypocrites at Google Alphabet. We discussed this in our post, YouTube Hypocrisy 101, and Rapster felon Bobby Shmurda. On October 17th, the large, politically moderate, and quite reasonable Red Ice TV channel was deleted. Red Ice's crime was focusing on real issues and real news. Can't have that. Red Ice was popular, garnering more than 45 million views, more than 326,000 subscribers, and nearly 2,000 videos, including several interviews with me. Fortunately, Red Ice has preserved its work and is still on alternative channels, demonstrating the Streisand effect their subscribers have picked up noticeably since the ban. One of the games YouTube plays is to ignore fair use copyright laws. Censors acknowledge it selectively for videos that don't counter Orwellian narratives. The idea, it seems, is to identify and target certain channels for the penalty box with initial strikes designed to encourage self-censorship. Hitting channels with a strike for covering newsworthy clips is unethical and in bad taste. Look at this American Spectator cartoon. We simply cannot allow people to pour into the United States undocumented, undetected, and unchecked. And here's the content moderator. Another white nationalist, we need to shut down this account. And his colleague observes that was Barack Obama, moron. But of course, they won't let this be known. This week, we stumbled across a new website called altcensored.com that has rescued and restored 29,000 censored videos so far, including content deleted from YouTube. Their catalog is increasing at a nice clip. We submitted to Alt Censored some of our favorites we suspect are on YouTube's purge list. Alt Censored's site presentation is clean and usable. In looking through it, we are pleased to discover some old YouTube channels we haven't seen in a couple of years. In fact, we're going to use one of them called This is Europa in our video spotlight box to give these channels some traction. When you watch This is Europa, a benign but wonderful video, you'll realize just how extreme even limited state censorship has become. Winter Watch has lost dozens has dozens of lost YouTube videos embedded in articles, and we're going to submit these and attempt to restore them. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, I think it's again a sign of the alternative media, the Facebook, the social media content controllers imploding on their own arrogance and stupidity and fascistic impulses. This is again the sign of a society that has created a younger generation between the ages of 18 and 35 that are so morally hollowed out that the agony of their own lack of identity is causing them to thrash about and desperately try and generate virtue by seemingly attacking that which they are told by their poor teachers is evil. But then again, they don't even have the ability to define evil because there's political correctness and there is no definition of right or wrong, black and white, when everything is the gray of political correctness. Jim?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
That's right on. You bet.
Here we have further reports now turning our attention to the Middle East. U.S. troops from Syria can't stay in Iraq, will come home. A few days after sending U.S. troops out of Syria to neighboring Iraq, and the Pentagon announced those troops would remain in Western Iraq, Defense Secretary Mark Esper has now confirmed that won't actually be happening at all. The plan was to shift them from eastern Syria to western Iraq up to the point where the Iraq government actually heard about it. The Iraq government has issued a subsequent statement saying the U.S. never asked if the troops could stay, and they cannot. The troops can come to Iraq for transit out of the region, so they'll be coming home after all. This is actually very good by Iraq and the right thing to do, and I approve of this move by the Iraqi government. Meanwhile, this was the initial reaction, and I think it's correct. Did Trump outsmart Putin with a Syria retreat? Russia will soon find itself caught between Turkey and Syria. After U.S. President Donald Trump announced a withdrawal from Syria, the House of Representatives overwhelmingly passed a resolution denouncing it as a benefit to adversaries of the U.S. government, including Syria, Iran, and Russia. 6 days later, Mitch McConnell, Republican leader of the Senate, introduced a similar resolution. If not arrested, withdrawing from Syria will invite more of the chaos that breeds terrorism and creates a vacuum our adversaries will certainly fill. Such bipartisan agreement is rare in Washington these days, but it underestimates the wisdom of Trump's decision, the benefits for U.S. interests in the Middle East, and the nasty trick he has played on Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump calls Syria a bloody sandbox. He's right about that. It's also a briar patch of warring tribes and sects, inexplicable ancient animosities, and irreconcilable differences. The president is not prepared to take responsibility for this complicated place or to get caught up in it. If leaving creates an opportunity for Russia to fill in the vacuum, as American lawmakers believe, then it is one Trump is happy to see. The Russian leader struts the world stage, but he has not won a victory. Sooner or later, Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, or the next iteration of jihad will break loose in Syria. When that happens, the Russians will be the new Satan on the block. Their diplomats in Damascus will come under attack, as will Russian troops. More troops will be sent to defend them. Putin's much prized Mediterranean naval installations will require reinforcement, and so on. Soon enough, jihad will inflame Russia's large Muslim population. Moscow itself will become a terrorist target. The safety zone that Putin and Erdogan have recently carved out will collapse. Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad rightly considers it a violation of his country's sovereignty, and if he can persuade his Russian patrons to shut down the zone, Erdogan will threaten another invasion. If Putin then sides with Turkey, Assad will take matters into his own hands. His army may not be fit for fighting armed opponents, but the Kurds are and can act as Assad's proxy. If and when such a border fight develops, Putin will find himself between Assad and Erdogan. Whatever he does, he will wind up in that most vulnerable of Middle Eastern positions, the friend of somebody's enemy. As a big power in charge, Russia will be expected to help its Syrian client rebuild the damage from the civil war. Physical reconstruction alone is expected to run 400 to 500 billion. This is a bill Trump has no intention of paying, and one more reason he was glad to hand northern Syria to Putin. Meanwhile, Russia reports more Syrian Kurds are withdrawing from the safe zone in accordance with the fallout. This is appropriate because the Kurds are actually now siding with Assad, which is a highly appropriate analysis. Russia's reported more Kurdish SDF fighters have successfully withdrawn from the Syrian safe zone, the 32-kilometer, 20-mile area along the Turkish border. They say the SDF reported the pullouts, and Russia can confirm but did not say how many. Russia's deputy foreign minister issued a statement saying it's the hope of the Russian government the Kurdish SDF will leave the safe zone voluntarily. Russia has expressed confidence that a 150-hour deal will be plenty of time. Russian officials also said it's their expectation once the SDF withdraws from the safe zone and matters are settled, efforts will be made to integrate them into the Syrian army. That's something Turkey is almost certain to object to because in the past they've made it clear they would not allow the Kurdish terrorists to become part of the Syrian government, but they really ought not to have a voice in the matter. That determination ought to be left up to the Kurds and the Syrians. Meanwhile, Russia writes off African debt worth over 20 billion. This was a brilliant move. Moscow has written off more than 20 billion in debt accumulated by African countries during the Soviet era. Russian President Putin announced Wednesday it was not only an act of generosity, but also a manifestation of pragmatism because many of the African states were not able to pay interest on these loans. Putin told TASS on the eve of the summit. While addressing the Russia-African Forum in Sochi, he called for trade between Russia and African countries to be doubled in the next 4 to 5 years. Putin also said that Russia intends to increase its presence in Africa at a state level. So here you have Russia increasing its influence in the Middle East and in Africa too. Scott, your comment.
Well, we've said in the beginning that Russia was going to step in and stop the entire Syrian civil war, mercenary overthrow, regime change operation that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were trying to orchestrate. And Putin did that the moment he came in and stopped the U.S. under Obama from attacking Assad for the alleged chemical weapons. Putin went in with Lavrov and said, we'll take all of the chemical weapons off the table and you'll leave them alone. And that was right. And then Putin, of course, and the military stepped in and bombed all of the tankers that were running the oil smuggling operations to Turkey. Iran has stepped in. So Russia really has been the dominant cleansing agent of this terrorism. And let's not forget, Russia has learned invaluable lessons with regards to Afghanistan. It is not going to ever repeat those mistakes. They will destroy everything that attempts to grow into a revolution or civil war spread like a cancer. Russia will have no tolerance of that, but they'll do it the smart way. They'll do it quietly and secretly. And I think everyone understands that, who understands the Russians. So their political position is going to establish them as the lead ambassador, diplomat, interlocutor for Syria, the Kurds, Turkey, and Iran. And Israel and the United States and Saudi Arabia are going to keep out of it. And Saudi Arabia already recognizes that. That's why Putin and Saudi Arabia are trying to develop a relationship, and Putin has said we are not going to be friends with any nation over another nation. We're friends with all nations who want to be friends with us. But there are red lines that we won't tolerate, such as the destruction of Syria and the flood of these refugees and people up into our areas. We're going to maintain the government that has been democratically elected. And that's different from the U.S. policy, which has been overthrow the Democrat-elected leadership because you're claiming they're undemocratic, or they're human rights, or they're bombing using chemical weapons, or they're doing white helmet activities. All of this is coming from the British. All of this is propaganda. All of this is lies. All of this is a disgusting betrayal of what America is and supposed to be. And we've devolved and degenerated ourselves into Mr. Hyde. We are no longer a city shining on a hill, a champion flag that is waving majestically in the breeze, inspiring with tears all mankind to seek the liberty and the opportunity and the godly devotion that we used to have under Reagan, under Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt. Now we've become a terrorist nation, overthrowing other nations, stealing and raping and pillaging, using it through proxies, and calling it democratic, liberation. We're sanctioning countries to the point of starvation and sickness because of moral virtue. I mean, this in my mind indicates, again, the civil war in America that needs to erupt, or the complete judgment and destruction of America that has been coming for a long time. And either way, we're simply passing through history, passing through this time. Our job is to speak truth to every human being we come in. That's what I did. My mother inspired me when I went to Iran, ever since I was growing up. My mother inspired me to speak eloquently, with dignity, to write, to always champion truth, and never engage in lies and dishonor. And that's why I've been welcomed by the Russian media and the Iranian media. It's because we speak truth, and with conviction and passion and humility. And at the same time, we do not tolerate a lot of the lies and the corruption that we see happening. And we call it the spade a spade. So we need to continue doing that, Jim, and I know we will. Go ahead.
What a concept. What a concept. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Well said, Scott. Unfortunately, I now have to report that Trump has partially contradicted himself, because I do believe withdrawing was a brilliant move, and now he appears to have been pressured to partially reverse it.
Well, let's remember, the Iraqis are telling the Americans, you will not be here. You are getting out of Iraq, and we're going to the United Nations to get law enforcement to kick you out. You're not going to be in here in Iraq.
Yes, yes, yes. And as the stories continue, Scott, we have more on recent developments here, some of which are, alas, troubling. U.S. sending tanks to Syria to focus on oil fields. I think this is the worst possible move that Trump could have made. Pentagon officials are revising their Syrian war plan around a totally new set of priorities, which Trump has defined simply as controlling Syria's oil, which everyone thought we were there to do anyway, in Iraq and in Libya and elsewhere. This came after Trump declared the Syrian war effectively over and subsequently backed off, withdrawing all forces. For a while, this is going to be a couple of hundred ground troops staying embedded with Kurds at the oil fields. Now the Pentagon is doing more, all in, sending tanks and armored vehicles into Syria. Senator Lindsey Graham is trying to take credit for this continuing war, with reports that he and long-retired General Jack Keane, a Fox News analyst, visited Trump at the White House twice to show him a map of Syria and emphasize where the oil is. Graham had been loudly wailing about the pullout from Syria and suggesting Iran might somehow seize Syria's oil if America didn't, as though Iran didn't have vast oil resources of its own. Those present say Trump fairly quickly resigned himself to keeping troops there to control the oil. Bad, bad, bad. While styling this is Trump reluctantly staying at war fits Graham's narrative, Trump has been talking since before his election about paying for wars in the Middle East by taking the oil, and has subsequently taken to Twitter to brag about how he's controlling Syria's oil. That small contingent of ground troops could never really control the oil is very much beside the point, as now the decision to send tanks into Syria amounts to a huge escalation of the military operation, and likely will mean the deployment of more troops into Syria to maintain the armored forces. It represents another long-term commitment to the ever-morphing U.S. war in Syria. Bad. The idea the U.S. will ultimately get all this oil for the cost of a few hundred troops is tailor-made for his existing view of the Middle East war. That said, it's hard to imagine U.S. companies eagerly lining up to extract appropriated oil out of occupied territory, and the U.S. ever getting the oil is certainly a pipe dream. A dream to keep the occupation going, but not much else. Meanwhile, Trump's Syria oil gambit is a crime, and what may be worse, a mistake. From RT, U.S. President Trump's baffling comments about keeping troops in Syria to secure the oil suggest a confused, contradictory, and ultimately self-defeating policy. I think they have it spot on. Earlier this month, Trump appeared to have used the impending Turkish invasion to deftly cut the Gordian knot of U.S. presence in Syria, citing it as a pretext for pulling out troops that weren't supposed to be there to begin with and had long since completed their mission in any case. He stood by that decision even as the Washington establishment shrieked about betrayal of allied Kurdish militias and was vindicated when a deal worked out by Moscow and Ankara created a solution that benefited everyone, except those in the U.S. still committed to regime change in Damascus, that is. While Trump has not officially renounced the Assad must go policy of his predecessor, the pullout was supposed to be the end of it in practice. The sudden talk of Syrian oil fields, however, suggests someone from the swamp managed to persuade the president to keep one foot in the endless foreign war he has pledged to end. We want to keep the oil, Trump said this week to the confusion of everyone. Attempting to explain on Thursday, he said oil fields were held by Islamic State until the U.S. took them over with the help of the Kurds. We will never let a reconstituted ISIS have those fields, except there's no sign of ISIS being reconstituted or rising from the ashes. And the Syrians rightly regard any U.S. attempt to seize the oil fields as theft and piracy. The oil fields in question were traditionally used to meet domestic demands and are too small to be interesting to Washington in terms of profit, journalist and Orientalist Andriy Otkukov told RT. One clue might be in the words of U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper, who said the purpose of keeping the troops in Syria is to deny access to ISIS and any other groups that may want to seek the revenue to enable their own malign activity. This phrasing is a dead giveaway. The oil gambit is not about ISIS, but about blocking the government in Damascus from using its own natural resources to rebuild. Already under a blockade by the U.S. and EU allies, Syria desperately needs the oil to help its people survive the winter. Malign activity is a phrase Washington often uses in reference to Iran, a strategic partner and ally of the Syrian government. If that sounds like a policy designed by someone from the Washington establishment, which has dreamed of regime change in Damascus for the past 8 years and greeted Trump's decision with wailing and gnashing of teeth, you are not alone. Fox News NBC News has even named a possible culprit, retired General Jack Keane, a Fox News military analyst, who they say gave Trump a briefing about the oil fields. Yet Keane has been against any U.S. withdrawal from Syria, the Middle East in general, and Trump has ignored his advice in the past in favor of other Fox personalities, like Tucker Carlson and his frequent guest, retired Army Colonel Douglas McGregor, who both approved the Syrian pullout. Scott, your thoughts? I do believe Trump has made a blunder here by sending back in these tanks, especially for the oil. That's just the worst possible position for the U.S. to be in.
Well, if he has done it, it is a blunder. It's stupid, and maybe he's not doing it just to appease the stupid people like Lindsey Graham and Jack Keane. Remember, Trump has to put these fires out, and he does pet the dog and tickle its ears, and no one likes a man tickling him more than Lindsey Graham. So Trump has sort of maybe appeased them and said, okay, I'll give it under consideration. And he says it, but he's not going to do it. Because I agree with you 100%, Jim. That would be the dumbest, stupidest thing he could do, because it's inevitably the U.S. is going to be pushed out of Syria. The Russians are going to give the S-400 missile defense systems to Syria. They've already got Turkey and Erdogan on their side. Everybody wants the United States out, especially the United States and the American people. But they're not going to tolerate the U.S. doing this. They're going to push the U.S. out like an infection. And that means they don't get out by their own, they don't get out willingly, they're going to get out in body bags. That's what I see is coming. Russia and Iran and Syria and Turkey are not going to tolerate America being in Syria. They're not in it to win it quickly, but they will win it in a slow war. If you want to go into a siege battle, they will do it, and they will kill your people, blow you out of the sky, and you're not going to be able to reinforce, and you're suddenly going to turn into a public relations Vietnam all over again. And Trump will lose the election. He will lose the election because of his double-mindedness, his hypocrisy, his lies, his deceit. People despise that. And they despise Lindsey Graham. They despise Keane. I've seen Keane. I'm disgusted by him. I think he sounds like just a an idiot right out of the General Motors automobile plant without an education of the morality of a worker in an automobile plant. This piece of garbage is a parasite postal worker pretending he's some sort of high classified military decision maker. Doug McGregor is a real man. Senator Dick Black is a real man, military men. They're the ones that Trump should be listening to, not these disgusting pricks.
I agree.
So this is not going to go well for Trump. He needs to, again, commit himself to removing America. He's never going to get the oil in Syria. It's an international scandal. It's a war crime. It's an international criminal court issue. The oil in Syria, as the oil in every other country and every other natural resources, is the property of the people living on that ground. That is the nature of the sovereignty of nations, and Trump is in violation of God's law when it comes to that, and it is a crime. Now, I'm hoping he's smart enough to hear that. Go ahead.
Right.
A story that came in too late to be included here. Trump went to a World Series game last night, and to my astonishment, he was booed, and the crowd was calling out, "Lock him up." And I wonder if it isn't a direct result of this move to send our tanks back into Syria. I find it inconceivable this would happen under other circumstances.
Yeah.
Scott. Yeah.
Okay.
Meanwhile, there's a brilliant article, Sandy Hook and the Murder of the First Amendment by Kurt Nemo, who acknowledges he doesn't know exactly what happened, but the government and the media have been caught hundreds of times lying about or twisting news stories, so I, Kurt Nemo, believe skepticism is entirely warranted. That said, he is now convinced that First Amendment is a dead letter. He's felt that way for some time. Recent events put a capstone on his previous arguments that much of the Bill of Rights is dead. This was recently underscored by the persecution of activist and author Jim Fetzer for writing a book that claims a massacre at Sandy Hook never happened. A Wisconsin jury has ruled that James Fetzer, a retired professor from the University of Minnesota Duluth, must pay Leonard Posner $450,000 for accusing him of forging his son Noah's death certificate. Fetzer is the co-author of Nobody Died at Sandy Hook, which alleges that Posner faked his son's birth certificate and that the Obama administration staged a shooting in an effort to pass legislation on gun control. Nemo, the ruling and award granted to plaintiff would undoubtedly drive Fetzer to financial ruin if it is not overturned on appeal, and he predicts it will stand. This court case is a pivotal moment for those who work to eradicate free speech, a right granted to those who make controversial statements or write books some people find objectionable. I published this comment on the blog. Thanks for this, Kurt. You are certainly accurate about the alleged offenses widely reported by the mainstream media. However, Mike Pelagic and I did not author the book. We edited it. There are 13 contributors, including 6 current or retired PhD professors, where we established that the school had been closed by 2008, that there were no students there, and that it was a FEMA drill presented as mass murder to promote gun control. We even found the manual for the exercise and included it as Appendix A. Moreover, I only observed, while offering a dozen reasons for thinking so, that the death certificate for Noah Posner that the plaintiff had provided to my colleague Kelly Watt was a fabrication, not that he had been the one to fake it. The laws of defamation require defaming a person, not merely characterize a document. 2 expert document examiners not only confirmed my conclusion, but determined that 3 other death certificates for Noah that had surfaced during discovery were also fakes. Summary judgments require there be no disputed facts where the authenticity of the death certificate remained in dispute. Nevertheless, the court simply set the 2 expert reports to the side as just opinions and ruled in favor of the plaintiff. Kevin Barrett, who is present most of the second day of the trial, has published a rather revealing account, which you can review at wounds.com, with commentaries now over 550. This was a classic SLAPP, strategic lawsuit against public participation to publish those who are exposing scams conducted by government authorities to instill fear into the American people, to make us more amenable to political manipulation. So Kurt has it right. You can download the first edition of the book for free by putting its title, Nobody Died at Sandy Hook PDF, in your browser and assess the evidence for yourself, which the court, alas, would not allow me to present in my defense.
Wow, terrible.
I've just published a brand new blog, The Sandy Hook Posner versus Fetzer Lawsuit, the basic document. The great public interest in this case leads me to make some of the most important documents, from the complaint to the oral hearing to the order of the court, affirming the plaintiff's summary judgment motion and denying mine, even though I had explained that by Connecticut law, not even parents are allowed to possess uncertified death certificates, which was the case with a copy the plaintiff made available to Kelly Watt in 2014 and published in Chapter 11 of Nobody Died at Sandy Hook, 2015, second edition, 2016. According to the complaint, there are no material differences between the copy of the death certificate published in the book above left and the copy of the death certificate attached to the complaint above right. Notice, however, that the death certificate attached to the complaint has a handwritten file number, top right, town certification on the left-hand side, and state certification, bottom portion, while the copy published in the book has none of those, which most would agree have to qualify as material differences.
Yep.
Moreover, during the course of discovery, Dave Gahary obtained a third death certificate from the town above left, and I secured a fourth from the state above right. We secured reports from two forensic document examiners, Larry Wickstrom from Minnesota and A.P. Ash Robertson from California. Both of them concluded that all four of these death certificates were fabrication. Wickstrom's affidavit, exam report, and expert CV, and Robertson's affidavit and CV were all in evidence prior to the oral hearing. But the only issue that remained for a jury to decide was the amount of damages I owed to the plaintiff for defaming him. One witness, apart from Mr. Posner, by the name of Dr. Libet, testified that Mr. Posner would have recovered from the PTSD induced by the murder of his son had it not been for the sentences in a book describing the death certificate as a fabrication. That, he said, induced permanent PTSD, his son's death only transient. But he acknowledged that he had no face-to-face contact with the plaintiff, and his diagnosis was based upon hearsay. The claim that I had said he fabricated the death certificate when I only said it was a fabrication, not that he had forged it, that I had harassed him, but I had never harassed him, that I had phone calls with Posner when I never had phone calls, that he began taking a turn for the worse in 2014 when the book wasn't published until 2015. Had he read the chapter co-authored with Kelly Watt, he would have known those claims, which he was told were false. Finally, I invite everyone to consider contributing to my legal defense fund. I emphasize, none of the money raised will be used to offset the absurd $450,000 verdict, but only to support the appeal that will set that award aside in the trial that I have been denied to correct the record, expose Sandy Hook, and to the extent possible under these circumstances, restore respect for the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and freedom of the press. You can find the defense website at jamesfetzer.com. You can find the blog at jamesfetzer.org. And for those who prefer to send a check, here's my address, James H. Fetzer Legal Defense Fund, 800 Violet Lane, Oregon, Wisconsin, 53575. Join the fight for freedom of speech.
Yeah. I'd say that I want to give a one quick 1 minute summary to Scott, real quick.
Well, I think Jim Fetzer is one of the greatest heroes of freedom of speech and thinking and American patriotism and human character that we are lucky enough to have in our midst in today's modern decaying times. He is a rock and a pillar and a fire by night and a mountain of salt and truth by day. And every American has a duty to pray for him and to support him and donate to him. And every attorney should file amicus briefs in support of Jim arguing in favor of his defense and the corruption of the courts and the destruction of our constitutional rights, which are being made precedents by this this case. And I'll say, of course, and I will always stand with Jim and be a witness wherever needed. My website was taken down by Noah Posner's mercenary aiding agents, and CNN Business did a story on it because I was promoting and discussing the truth and the facts that Jim has expressed and written about. This is an absolute corruption. This is something that cannot be tolerated. I think it'll be overthrown either in the legitimate legal processes or perhaps in the physical courtrooms being overthrown and destroyed by the outrage that the American public will inevitably express at this crime. Jim?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Scott. That's spot on what you're saying. Thanks for watching Truth versus News here on October 28th. It's really been something else as we expose the official facts and acts that are not truth that we're standing for. And we thank you for watching, folks. And so tune in next week for even more excitement, I'm sure. Bye.